Most people see a dime as just 10 cents, but what if I told you that some dimes hiding in your change could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars today? Stay tuned as we uncover 8 of the most valuable one-dime coins that could change your pocket change into a fortune. The year 1966 rests within one of the most transformative periods in American numismatic history, a time when the very essence of United States coinage was shifting, when the materials that had defined generations of coins were being replaced, and when the U.S. Mint was under immense pressure to keep coins circulating in the economy. Among all the coins produced during this turbulent era, the 1966 Roosevelt dime stands as a reflection of not just monetary necessity, but also the broader historical, economic, and cultural changes of mid-20th century America. To understand this coin, we must first step back into the years leading up to its creation. The dime itself had long been an essential part of U.S. currency, its history beginning with the draped bust design of the late 1700s, evolving through the seated Liberty and Barber series, and eventually the Mercury dime, which became one of the most beloved designs in American numismatics. But after the death of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1945, a decision was made to honor his memory by placing his portrait on the dime, chosen because of his close association with the March of Dimes campaign to combat polio, which he himself had struggled with. The Roosevelt dime was introduced in 1946, featuring John Arsenic's portrait of Roosevelt on the obverse and a torch flanked by an olive branch and oak branch on the reverse, symbols of liberty, peace, and strength. For 2 decades, the dime carried this design in silver, composed of 90% silver and 10% copper. This was the standard for circulating dimes, quarters, and half dollars. But by the early 1960s, a storm was brewing. The rising price of silver and a national coin shortage forced Congress and the Mint to rethink coinage materials. The shortage grew so severe that people were hoarding silver coins, pulling them from circulation, believing their intrinsic metal value was worth more than their face value. Banks and businesses complained. Coin-operated machines were disrupted, and the American public became increasingly frustrated. President Lyndon B. Johnson addressed this crisis in 1965, and the Coinage Act of 1965 was passed, fundamentally reshaping American coinage. Silver would be removed from dimes and quarters, replaced with the clad composition of copper sandwiched between outer layers of copper nickel. The half dollar would retain a reduced 40% silver content for a time, but the dime and quarter lost silver entirely for the first time since their creation. This change was not welcomed by all collectors or the public. Many saw it as the end of a proud silver tradition, yet it was deemed necessary to stabilize the economy and keep coins available for everyday transactions. The 1965 Coinage Act also suspended mint marks for several years, including 1965, 1966, and 1967, as a way to discourage collectors from hoarding coins from specific mints. Thus, every 1966 dime, regardless of where it was minted, Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, bears no mint mark. This fact adds an extra layer of intrigue for modern collectors, since identifying where a 1966 dime was struck is impossible through the coin itself, and can only be speculated on through historical mintage records. In 1966, the Mint continued producing the Roosevelt dime in massive numbers. Over 1.3 billion were struck, a record figure meant to alleviate the national shortage. The coins were identical in design to the earlier silver Roosevelt dimes, but their composition had changed forever. They were now a copper nickel-clad coin, with an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, giving the coin a total weight of 27 grams with the diameter of 17.91 millimeters. Visually, these coins look similar to their silver predecessors, though experienced collectors could detect differences. The clad dimes had a slightly different color tone, with a more subdued luster compared to the brilliance of silver coins, and the edge of the dime revealed its copper core in a distinct reddish-brown stripe that made it clear the era of silver had ended. Still, these coins carried Roosevelt's proud portrait. His stern, yet optimistic profile gazing left a symbol of leadership during America's darkest days of the Great Depression and World War II. the reverse design remained unchanged, the torch olive branch and oak branch continuing to represent liberty, peace, and strength, three virtues Americans clung to during the turbulent 1960 seconds, as the Vietnam War, civil rights struggles, and cultural revolutions defined the decade. The 1966 dime thus serves as more than just pocket change. It is a tangible artifact of the economic realities and political decisions of the Johnson era. It tells the story of how America transitioned from silver coinage to modern clad coinage, and it reminds collectors today of the push and pull between tradition and necessity. From a numismatic perspective, the 1966 dime is both common and historically important. Because of its massive mintage, it is not rare in circulation, and most examples today carry only face value. However, its importance lies in its place in history, the very first full year of copper-nickel-clad dime production. It is a cornerstone for anyone studying the transformation of United States coinage. Collectors often seek high-grade examples, especially those that survived decades without heavy circulation. Mint state coins graded Ms. 65 or higher are desirable, particularly those with strong luster and sharp details. The absence of mint marks during this period makes varieties more limited than in other years, but that very lack of mint marks has sparked fascination among hobbyists, as it was a unique decision in U.S. coinage history. Furthermore, special mint sets produced from 1965 to 1967 substituted for proof sets during this transitional period, and 1966 dimes from these sets are especially interesting. They were struck with higher quality standards than regular circulation coins, though not quite to the level of traditional proofs. These SMS dimes can be distinguished by their sharper strikes, smoother fields, and occasionally cameo contrast between frosted devices and mirrored backgrounds. Collectors often prize these SMS issues as a special subset of the Roosevelt dime series. The broader significance of the 1966 dime can also be understood by placing it in the continuum of American monetary history. The removal of silver not only reflected economic necessity, but also foreshadowed future changes as America steadily moved away from precious metals backing its currency. It was part of the gradual departure from the silver standard, culminating in the eventual abandonment of the gold standard under President Nixon in 1971. Thus, the small dime of 1966 carries within it echoes of much larger economic policies that reshaped global finance. Its story intertwines with inflation debates, currency stability, and the American struggle to balance tradition with innovation. As decades passed, the 1966 dime continued to circulate in vast numbers. By the 1970s and 1980 seconds, most Americans gave little thought to it. It was a common coin when used in vending machines, pay phones, laundromats, and countless small purchases. Yet beneath that ordinary exterior was a coin that told the story of a nation in transition. Today, as collectors study these coins, they not only appreciate their physical attributes, but also reflect on the sweeping historical currents they represent. To hold a 1966 dime is to hold a piece of the moment when silver ended in everyday coinage, when mint marks temporarily vanished, when America's economy adapted to the realities of rising metal prices, and when the image of Roosevelt continued to honor a president who had guided the country through crisis. In the world of numismatics, context is everything, and the 1966 Roosevelt dime provides one of the richest contexts in all of American coinage history. While it may not fetch extraordinary sums at auction compared to rare errors or low mintage issues, its importance as a historical marker cannot be overstated. It stands as the everyday coin that symbolized extraordinary change, and for collectors and historians alike, it is a reminder that even the most common coin can tell a story that stretches across economics, politics, and culture, making the 1966 dime a cornerstone of understanding mid-20th century America. The story of the 1989 United States Roosevelt dime is not just the tale of a small coin that fits in the palm of your hand. Is the unfolding of American history, the continuation of a national design that began in the aftermath of the Second World War and carried forward the legacy of one of the most transformative presidents of the 20th century, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The dime of 1989 stands as a representative of the coinage system that had been in place since 1946, when the Roosevelt dime first appeared as a commemoration of the life and service of Roosevelt, who had led the country through the Great Depression and the war, and who had been struck down by illness, yet remembered for his leadership, courage, and above all his tireless efforts to fight polio and establish the March of Dimes that helped save countless lives. The dime in 1989 carries that legacy unchanged on its obverse with the portrait of Roosevelt facing left, designed by John R. Sinek, the chief engraver of the United States Mint, whose initials JS can be found at the truncation of the bust, a design that by 1989 had already been in circulation for more than 4 decades and had become instantly familiar to every American household. The date 1989 appears clearly beneath the portrait and above the word liberty, with the national motto "In God We Trust" placed in front of the president's profile, a small mintmark letter D for Denver, P for Philadelphia, or S for San Francisco. Proof coins is present near the bust to identify where each piece was struck. The reverse design of the 1989 dime remained faithful to Sinek's vision, with a torch in the center symbolizing liberty, flanked by an olive branch on the left representing peace and an oak branch on the right representing strength and independence. The words United States of America encircle the design, with the denomination 1 dime placed at the bottom, and the national motto Pluribus Unum running horizontally. Across the field, the 1989 Roosevelt dime was struck during a transitional period in United States coinage history. Although by appearance it looked identical to dimes of earlier decades, its metallic composition had been permanently altered since 1965, when the Coinage Act ended the use of 90% silver in dimes and quarters in favor of a copper-nickel-clad composition, due to the rising cost of silver and the need to conserve resources for the growing American economy. Thus the 1989 dime was composed of outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, giving the coin its distinctive silvery color, yet without the intrinsic precious metal value of earlier silver dimes. Collectors and numismatists often look at the mintage numbers to understand the availability and relative rarity of a coin, and in 1989, the United States Mint struck more than 1.3 billion dimes across its facilities, with the Philadelphia Mint producing over 1.2 billion pieces, the Denver Mint striking more than 837 million, and the San Francisco Mint issuing more than 3 million proof dimes specially prepared with polished dies and planchets for collectors. These staggering mintage totals ensured that the 1989 dime was a common coin in circulation, readily available in pockets, cash registers, and banks across the nation. The value of such coins in circulated condition remained equal to their face value of 10 cents, but in pristine uncirculated and proof conditions, the 1989 dime could hold higher collector interest, particularly in the form of error coins, misstrikes, and those with high mint state grades given by professional grading services. To understand the place of the 1989 dime in American history, we must consider the broader economic and political landscape of the United States. At that time, the year 1989 marked the closing chapter of the Reagan era as President Ronald Reagan finished his second term, and George H.W. Bush took office as the 41st President of the United States. The Cold War was drawing to a dramatic end, with the fall of the Berlin Wall in November of that year symbolizing a new era of global relations. At home, the American economy had seen strong growth during the 1980s, yet concerns about deficits, trade imbalances, and social challenges remained. Through it all, the Roosevelt dime continued as an unchanged fixture in everyday life, reminding Americans of the president who had championed economic recovery and global leadership during his own turbulent era. For collectors, studying the 1989 dime also provides insight into minting technology of the late 20th century, as by this time, the mint had modernized its equipment, and the quality of strike and consistency in production was superior to earlier decades. Yet, even in this era, error coins still occurred, including off-center strikes, double dies clipped planchets, and coins struck on incorrect planchets, which today can command significant premiums when discovered in 1989. Dimes. One could imagine the ordinary lives of millions of Americans in that year who held these dimes without a second thought, slipping them into parking meters, vending machines, and payphones, each dime serving as a small yet essential tool of daily commerce. Yet to the historian and the collector, each coin carries the weight of a story, a reminder that money is not just a medium of exchange, but a piece of cultural heritage. The 1989 dime also reminds us of the continuity of coinage design in the United States, for despite changing times, presidents' policies, and technologies, the Roosevelt dime remained unaltered, serving as a symbol of stability and tradition. The endurance of this design shows the profound respect Americans held for Roosevelt's legacy and the March of Dimes movement that helped eradicate polio in the nation. For 2 hours, one could speak on the historical context, the political meaning, the economic background, and the numismatic significance of the 1989 dime, stretching from Roosevelt's own era to the final decade of the 20th century, connecting the coin to the lives of ordinary Americans and the greater narrative of United States history, whether examined through its design details, its mintages, its place in commerce, or its symbolism. The 1989 dime stands as a bridge between past and present, a coin that, while small in size, carries the immense legacy of a nation that values liberty, strength, peace, and unity. Imagine holding a small piece of American history in the palm of your hand, a coin so ordinary in appearance, yet so deeply connected to the lives of millions of people across the nation. The 1977 one dime, known to collectors as the Roosevelt dime, is far more than just 10 cents. It is a reflection of an era shaped by politics, culture, and economics, and it carries with it a story that spans decades and reaches back even further to the origins of American coinage itself. To understand the 1977 dime, we must travel back to the aftermath of World War II, when the United States sought to honor one of its most iconic leaders, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who guided the country through the Great Depression and the Second World War. The dime was chosen for this tribute because of Roosevelt's lifelong association with the March of Dimes, a campaign to fight polio, the disease that he himself battled during his life. And in 1946, just a year after his death, the Roosevelt dime entered circulation, replacing the mercury dime that had been in use since 1916. By 1977, the dime had already been circulating for more than 3 decades, but it continued to be a vital part of everyday American life. However, the dime struck in this year stand out for several reasons tied both to history and to numismatics. When we examine the 1977 dime, we must first look at its design. On the obverse, the familiar portrait of Roosevelt created by John Arsenault remains bold and dignified, with his profile facing left, his name subtly tied to the principles of courage, leadership, and perseverance surrounding his portrait. We see the inscriptions "Liberty and God We Trust," the date 1977, and the small mint mark if the coin was produced at Denver or San Francisco, while Philadelphia coins of this year were struck without a mint mark. The reverse continues the theme of national pride, with the torch of liberty flanked by an olive branch on one side, representing peace, and an oak branch on the other, symbolizing strength and independence. The motto, Pluribus Unum, from many one, ties the coin to the larger American identity. Now, to truly understand the 1977 dime, we must place it in its historical and economic context. The 1970s were a turbulent time in the United States. The country had just come through the Vietnam War. Watergate had shaken public confidence, inflation was rising, and the Cold War still defined much of global politics. In this atmosphere, every element of daily life, including money, took on additional meaning. Though the dime may seem small, its value to everyday Americans was undeniable. In 1977, a dime could still purchase small necessities such as a payphone call, a newspaper, or a handful of candy in vending machines. But more importantly, the dime remained a symbol of stability in a period of uncertainty in terms of minting. The 1977 dime was produced at 3 different locations: the Philadelphia Mint, which issued coins without a mint mark; the Denver Mint, marked with a small d; and the San Francisco Mint, which struck proof coins with an S mint mark. These mint marks play an important role for collectors because each mint had its own mintage numbers, quality, and strike differences. In Philadelphia, over 867 million dimes were produced, while Denver contributed more than 376 million, and San Francisco struck nearly 3.25 million proof coins. The massive numbers from Philadelphia and Denver ensured that these coins circulated widely across the country, meaning millions of Americans touched and used these very dimes in their daily lives. For numismatists and collectors, though the 1977 dime is often valued not just for its historical context, but also for its condition while circulated, examples remain extremely common. Uncirculated or mint state coins can command higher interest, and proof issues from San Francisco are particularly sought after because of their sharp strikes and mirror-like finishes. Errors and varieties also add depth to the story of the 1977 dime. During mass production, mistakes occurred that today fascinate collectors: doubled dies, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other striking anomalies make these coins rare and sometimes very valuable in the numismatic market. These errors transform what might seem like an ordinary dime into a prize collectible worth for more than its face value. Yet the true value of the 1977 dime cannot be measured solely in dollars and cents. Instead, it lies in the way the coin connects us to a moment in time. In 1977, Jimmy Carter had just been inaugurated as president. The American economy faced stagflation and social change was sweeping the nation, and while newspapers covered global conflicts, political struggles, and cultural milestones, Americans still reached into their pockets each day and found coins like the 1977 dime. It is through this ordinary act of commerce that history and daily life intersect. The story of this coin is also tied to the evolution of American coinage. By 1977, silver had long been removed from circulating dimes with the shift to a copper-nickel-clad composition. Beginning in 1965, due to the rising cost of silver, what once was a precious metal coin had now become a token of modern economics and inflation. This transition reflects the changing nature of money itself, and by studying the 1977 dime we witness the broader transformation of currency in the modern world. For collectors and historians alike, this coin is a window into how design, artistry, and practicality meet in the minting process. The Roosevelt portrait, chosen in 1946, remained unchanged by 1977, but subtle differences in dies and striking quality create a variety of coins that collectors enjoy studying in detail. The proof coins from San Francisco represent the mint's dedication to craftsmanship, with their sharp designs contrasting against frosted portraits that gleam in collectors' albums. Furthermore, the 1977 dime connects to the story of American numismatic tradition, stretching all the way back to the Coinage Act of 1792, which established the U.S. Mint and defined the denominations we still use today. Each coin is a descendant of that legislation, and the Roosevelt dime in particular reminds us of how coins are both works of art and tools of commerce. By exploring the 1977 dime, we find ourselves asking questions about value, rarity, and meaning. What makes one coin worth only 10 cents while another, struck in error, might sell for hundreds or even thousands? What does it say about society when a common dime becomes a collectible treasure? The answers to these questions reveal as much about human culture as they do about economics and metallurgy. As we expand the story into a longer exploration, we would look at the biographies of the designers, at the technologies used in the minting presses of the 1970s, at the metallurgical science behind copper-nickel-clad coinage, and at the shifting role of coinage in an era when paper currency, credit cards, and electronic payments were beginning to change the way Americans Thought about money. This coin then becomes a gateway into larger conversations about art history, economics, politics, and human experience, and that is why the 1977 dime remains far more than just a small piece of metal. It is an enduring artifact of American history. It speaks to us about leadership through the portrait of Roosevelt, about national ideals through the symbols of liberty, peace, and strength, and about the lives of everyday Americans who used it as part of their daily existence. And when collectors today hold a pristine proof from San Francisco, or stumble across an error coin that survived against all odds, they are not simply holding money. They are holding a story, legacy, and a bridge between past and present. And that is the true power of the 1977 dime. Imagine holding in your hand a small coin no larger than the size of a fingertip, a coin that passes through the daily routines of millions of Americans yet carries with it a story of history, economics, design, artistry, and value beyond its face. Worth the 1972 Roosevelt dime is one such piece. It is not just a 10-cent coin, it is a reflection of a nation in transition, a piece of metal that embodies both heritage and modernity, and a continuation of one of the most respected coin series in American history. To truly understand this dime, you must journey back through the history of the Roosevelt series, its origins, its role in American life, and the unique features of the year 1972, which gave birth to the dime in question. Roosevelt dime was first minted in 1946 as a tribute to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had passed away in 1945. Roosevelt was not only the nation's leader during the Great Depression and the Second World War, but he was also closely associated with the March of Dimes, an initiative to fight polio, a disease he himself had battled. With his personal struggle and his political leadership, it was only fitting that his profile should grace the dime, the smallest denomination that Americans use daily, yet one carrying the biggest symbolic connection to his legacy. When we move forward to 1972, we step into a United States that was experiencing significant change both politically and socially. The Vietnam War was ongoing, the Watergate scandal was about to unfold, inflation was beginning to pressure the economy, and the mint itself was facing challenges with coin production, as the country had already transitioned away from silver coinage just a few years earlier. By 1971, the last circulating silver coins had disappeared, replaced fully with copper nickel-clad coinage. The 1972 Roosevelt dime is part of this new era. It contains no silver. It is composed of a copper core with an outer layer of copper nickel, giving it durability and a bright silvery appearance. But unlike its pre-1965 counterparts, it held no intrinsic metal value above face. This was the reality of modern coinage. The design of the 1972 dime continued to follow John R. Sinek's original portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse, his dignified bust facing left, with the word liberty prominently displayed to his left, and the motto "In God We Trust" below his chin. The date 1972 rests to the right, while the mint mark, when present, appears near the base of Roosevelt's neck. Sinek's initials, JS, also appear subtly at the truncation of the portrait, which sparked some controversy in the late 1940s as critics mistakenly believed the letters stood for Joseph Stalin, a reflection of the paranoia of the Cold War era. Yet by 1972, that controversy had faded into history. On the reverse, the familiar torch of liberty stands at the center, flanked by an olive branch on the left symbolizing peace, and an oak branch on the right symbolizing strength and independence. The inscriptions "United States of America, One Dime" and "E Pluribus Unum" frame the design, making it a clean, balanced composition that has stood the test of time through decades of production. From a numismatic perspective, the 1972 dime is fascinating because it was minted in 3 different facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each producing millions of examples, but with differences that collectors today carefully study. Philadelphia coins carry no mint mark. Denver coins carry the D mint mark, and San Francisco produced proof coins with the S mint mark. The proofs were specially struck with polished dies and planchets, giving them mirror-like surfaces and sharper details, and they were sold directly to Collectors and proof sets rather than released for circulation product numbers were massive, with hundreds of millions struck for circulation, which makes the 1972 dime a common coin in most respects. Yet within these huge mintages exist varieties and errors that capture the attention of dedicated collectors. Off-center strikes, double die obverses or reverses, weak strikes, and misaligned dies are examples of the kind of minting anomalies that can turn an ordinary dime into a valuable treasure. In fact, some 1972 proof dimes show deep cameo contrast with frosted design elements against brilliant fields, making them highly sought after by collectors. The context of 1972 in coin collecting is also worth noting. This was a time when Americans had already started looking more closely at their pocket change in search of rare coins. Since the great coin shortage of the early 1960s and the switch away from silver, there was a surge of public interest in numismatics. The government had stopped producing silver dimes after 1964, but many people still hoarded pre-65 dimes, quarters, and half dollars for their silver content. The 1972 dime represented the new normal of fiat-based coinage, valuable not for its metal, but for its place in commerce. And as a collectible when preserved in high grade culturally, the dime of this period was deeply embedded in American life. It was a coin that children used to buy candy from corner stores, that people dropped into payphones to call loved ones, that laundromats and vending machines demanded as a standard unit of exchange, and that commuters used daily in parking meters. The dime was not just money, it was a coin of everyday survival, a bridge between the small conveniences of life and the larger economic currents of the nation. The fact that it carried Roosevelt's image gave it even more symbolic weight, tying the daily struggles of ordinary Americans to the memory of a president who had led them through some of the hardest chapters of the 20th century. Over time, the 1972 Roosevelt dime has become a subject of interest, not because of rarity in circulation, but because it represents a stable continuity in design and production. The coin is still in circulation today, though often worn down from decades of use for collectors. However, condition is everything. A dime from 1972, found in mint state with full torch lines on the reverse, meaning the horizontal lines of the torch are fully struck, can command much higher prices than a worn example. Coins graded by professional services at the highest levels can reach values well above their face worth, showing how condition, rarity, and collector demand intersect in the world of numismatics. When we stretch this perspective over the course of 2 hours, we can examine in detail the historical forces that shape this coin, the artistic background of John Arsenic, the technological processes at the mints in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, the cultural role of the dime in American life, the collector demand for proof coins, cameo examples, and error varieties, and the economic realities of coinage in a post-silver era. Each of these aspects adds a layer of depth, making the 1972 dime not just a 10-cent coin but a window into the economic, social, and political landscape of America. At the Tomato conclude, the 1972 Roosevelt dime is more than a date in a series, it is a story of legacy. It is the continuation of Roosevelt's memory on the nation's coinage. It is a product of a time when America was redefining itself in money, politics, and culture, and it is a collectible that still draws attention today. For those who hold it in their hands, it is a reminder that even the smallest coins carry the largest stories, and within their metal rests the history of a nation. Imagine you are holding a small silver-colored coin in your hand, a coin that most people would overlook as just another dime, yet this one carries a story that reaches back into the very heart of American history, culture, and economic change. The coin I am talking about is the 1976 one dime issued in the United States. The year 1976 was unlike any other in the nation. It was the bicentennial year, the year when Americans celebrated 200 years of independence from Britain. The entire country was filled with patriotism, parades, fireworks, and commemorations. The minting of coins in that year played a symbolic role in connecting citizens to their heritage. Now, while quarters, half dollars, and dollars famously received special bicentennial designs featuring the colonial drummer Independence Hall, and the Liberty Bell with the moon. The dime did not get a commemorative design, it continued with the standard Roosevelt dime design. Yet, the 1976 dime holds its own place in numismatic history, and its importance lies in the context of the time, the design, the material, the minting process, and the value it has gained over the years. The Roosevelt dime was first introduced in 1946, following the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States. Roosevelt was not only one of the most influential leaders of the 20th century, but he was also deeply connected to the March of Dimes campaign to fight polio. The choice of his image on the dime was both a tribute and a symbol of his impact on American life. When you examine a 1976 Roosevelt dime, the obverse shows the familiar portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt facing left with the inscriptions "Liberty and God, We Trust." The mint mark, and the date 1976, the reverse, depicts a torch symbolizing liberty, an olive branch symbolizing peace, and an oak branch symbolizing strength and independence. These symbols had carried forward since 1946, and by 1976, they resonated even more deeply because the nation was celebrating its bicentennial. It is important to understand the historical environment of 1976. Inflation was rising, the economy faced turbulence after the oil crisis of the early 1970s, and coinage itself was undergoing changes. Just a decade earlier, silver had been removed from the dime after 1964, replaced with a copper-nickel-clad composition, so the 1976 dime was struck in a non-silver alloy of outer copper-nickel bonded to an inner pure copper core. It weighed 2.27 grams and measured 17.91 millimeters in diameter. Millions of these dimes were struck for circulation at both the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint, with proof issues produced in San Francisco. Yet not all dimes are created equal, because small minting variations, striking errors, and proof quality differences make some of these coins far more valuable than face value for collectors. The 1976 dime offers several points of fascination. First are the mint marks. The Philadelphia Mint did not use a P mint mark at that time, so any coin without a mint mark is from Philadelphia. The Denver Mint coins carry a D mark, and the San Francisco Mint produced both proof coins and special collector strike. Some proof coins came in brilliant, mirror-like finishes, while others are cameo and deep cameo, which are highly prized among collectors. Error coins also play a major role in value. These include off-center strikes, double dies, broad strikes, missing clad layers, and transitional errors. Some error dimes from 1976 can fetch hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auction. But beyond the technical details, there is a much broader story to tell about what the 1976 dime represents in the larger journey of American coinage. The Roosevelt dime is the longest-running dime design in United States history, still in use today more than 70 years after it was introduced. The year 1976 is particularly symbolic because it was a point when the nation looked back at 2 centuries of progress, conflict, and triumphs. From the Revolutionary War to the Cold War, coins like the 1976 dime were not just money, they were pieces of history moving through millions of hands every day. They were silent witnesses to the struggles of working class families, to the pride of a nation celebrating its birthday, to the changes in technology and minting that pushed forward efficiency and precision. Let's dive deeper into the mintage numbers and values. The Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of dimes in 1976, while the Denver Mint output was also high, with both facilities combining to make sure the nation had an abundant coin supply. However, it is the condition that determines collectability. Circulated examples hold mostly face value, but coins graded mint state, especially Ms. 65 and higher, start to attract strong premiums. Proofs from San Francisco and PR 67 and higher are often sought after. Cameo proofs with frosted devices against mirror fields add further desirability. Among serious collectors, auction records show that top-quality 1976 dimes, particularly those with full bands detail on the reverse torch, can bring in impressive amounts. As you follow this history, you start to see that the dime is more than just A 10-cent coin, it connects us to a period in time, the bicentennial year of 1976. It reflects the nation's decision to maintain continuity on some denominations while redesigning others. It represents the ongoing tribute to Franklin D. Roosevelt, a man who led the nation through depression and war, and it embodies the changes in minting technology that continue to evolve. To truly appreciate a 1976 dime, you must imagine it in circulation. Picture it being used in 1976 to buy a newspaper or to make a phone call from a payphone. Picture millions of them jingling in pockets across the country as people celebrated the bicentennial in Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Boston, and beyond. Picture how ordinary Americans held onto certain coins from that year as keepsakes, just because it was the bicentennial year. Even without special designs, the dime became part of that memory. And today, when a collector or historian picks up a 1976 dime, it is not just about condition or value, it is about connecting with that moment in American history. This is why the 1976 dime makes such a fascinating subject for collectors, historians, and everyday Americans alike. It may not bear the colonial drummer or Liberty Bell, but it represents endurance, continuity, and the quiet strength of American coinage. It is a coin that carries with it the echoes of Franklin Roosevelt, the spirit of the bicentennial, and the enduring pride of a nation 200 years after independence. In the vast world of American coinage, where every small piece of metal carries the weight of history, politics, economics, and national identity, the 1978 Roosevelt dime stands as more than just a 10-cent coin. It is a tangible artifact that tells us about the United States during the late 1970s, a time of change, uncertainty, and resilience. To understand the history of the 1978 dime, we must begin not in 1978, but in the aftermath of World War II, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, had passed away in 1945. Roosevelt had been beloved by many Americans for his leadership through the Great Depression and the Second World War, and in recognition of his legacy, the United States Mint decided in 1946 to honor him by replacing the Mercury dime with a new design, the Roosevelt dime, designed by John R. Sinnock, the chief engraver of the mint, became the permanent 10-cent coin, and since then it has remained in circulation for decades, symbolizing both Roosevelt's enduring legacy and the changing times of the nation. By 1978, America was a nation wrestling with inflation, energy crises, and shifting political power, but the dime continued to serve as a backbone of commerce, representing stability in an era of turmoil. Unlike earlier dimes, which were struck in silver until 1964, the 1978 dime was composed of copper nickel clad, a change that had occurred in 1965, when the rising cost of silver forced the mint to adopt a cheaper but durable alloy. This decision was not merely technical, it was economic policy in action. The very metal of the coin reflected the economic pressures of the 1960s and 1970 seconds, and the 1978 dime is a perfect example of how American coinage mirrors the financial reality of its time. Collectors often examine the details of the 1978 dime, its obverse portrait of Roosevelt facing left with the inscription Liberty above and In God We Trust to the left, along with the date 1978 below, and the mint mark, which can be found to the right of the torch when struck in Denver or San Francisco, and absent in Philadelphia, which at that time still did not use a mint mark. The reverse of the coin features the torch symbolizing liberty, flanked by an olive branch representing peace and an oak branch representing strength. This imagery is not accidental, but carefully chosen to remind Americans of their ideals every time they held the coin in their hand. Now, the production numbers of the 1978 dime were vast. The Philadelphia Mint struck hundreds of millions of coins, while the Denver Mint contributed its own massive mintage, and San Francisco produced proof issues specifically for collectors. In fact, the high production numbers of these dimes explain why they are still common today in circulation, yet when examined in pristine mint state condition or with special proof quality, they become highly desirable for collectors. Grading companies such as PCGs and NGC often assign values based on strike condition, luster, and absence of wear. And in top grades, the 1978 dime can fetch far higher than its face value, which adds to its significance in the coin collecting world. But the story of the 1978 dime goes beyond numbers and mintages. It is a story about how Americans lived in 1978, when Jimmy Carter was president, when inflation made everyday goods more expensive, and when a dime still carried purchasing power enough for candy, gum, or a payphone call. For many families, coins like these were not simply loose change, but a vital part of their daily economy, and for children of that era, collecting coins from change was often the beginning of a lifelong passion for numismatics. The coin itself is also part of a broader narrative of Roosevelt's image in American memory. Roosevelt had championed programs like the March of Dimes to fight polio, a disease that had personally afflicted him, and it is no coincidence that the dime was chosen to honor him. This connection meant that every dime minted, including the 1978 issue, carried a symbolic reminder of the fight against disease and the value of public service. Beyond its economic use in commerce, the dime therefore also had a moral and historical meaning. Coin collectors and historians alike see the 1978 dime as an accessible entry point into American history because it links the design decisions of the mid-20th century with the economic conditions of the 1970s. It stands at the crossroads of post-war optimism and late 20th century challenges, and if we were to dive deeper, we would see how these coins circulated during an era when the United States Mint was improving its technology presses and quality controls to meet the growing demands of commerce. As America expanded in trade and population, the dime remained a stable unit of value. From vending machines to toll booths to pocket change, a dime was universally recognized and necessary. And so, the 1978 dime is more than a piece of copper nickel. It is an artifact of everyday life, a witness to inflation, energy crises, political debates, and cultural changes. It passed through millions of hands, each one with a story, each one with a connection to that moment in American history. In the collector's world, varieties of the 1978 dime also spark interest. While there are no major dramatic errors as seen in other coin series, subtle die varieties, strike differences, and proof issues create niches for dedicated collectors who track down flawless specimens or unusual examples to complete their sets. The 1978 dime teaches us that not every valuable coin must be rare. Sometimes its historical and cultural value is just as significant, and it gives us a way to study the life of the nation at that moment in time. As we explore deeper into its production, distribution, and circulation, we uncover the relationship between coinage and identity, between economy and design, between memory and metal. And for this reason, simple 1978 dime, when studied carefully, can provide enough material to speak for hours about design, politics, technology, economy, and the personal lives of ordinary Americans who relied on this coin each day. The 1978 Roosevelt dime is not rare, yet it is invaluable for understanding America in the late 1970s, a reminder that even the smallest coins carry the largest histories, and when we hold not just 10 cents, but a story that spans generations, from Roosevelt's presidency to Carter's challenges, and from the silver era to the clad era. This coin is a history lesson in the palm of your hand. In the year 1986, the United States was at a pivotal moment in its cultural and economic story. The nation was experiencing the final years of the Cold War under President Ronald Reagan. The economy was shifting after years of high inflation in the 1970s, and the American Mint was continuing its long-standing tradition of producing coins that were both functional pieces of currency and silent witnesses to history. Among these coins was the 1986 Roosevelt dime, a small piece of American money that might appear ordinary at first glance, but carries with it a story that reflects the values, the leadership, and the artistic vision of the United States. The dime itself had been in circulation for decades, since its first release in 1946. honoring Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, who had passed away the previous year. Roosevelt was not just remembered as the president who led America through the Great Depression and World War II, but also as the leader who championed the March of Dimes, a program originally created to fight polio, a disease that had personally affected him. When the dime was chosen as the denomination to carry his portrait, it symbolized both his leadership and his role in improving public health. So by 1986, every dime struck continued that legacy. The obverse of the 1986 dime carries the familiar left-facing portrait of Roosevelt, sculpted by John R. Sinek, the chief engraver of the United States Mint from 1925. Until his death in 1947, Sinek's initials JS appear at the base of Roosevelt's neck, and for decades conspiracy theories circulated suggesting that those initials secretly honored Joseph Stalin, a reflection of Cold War paranoia, but in truth, the initials belonged solely to Sinek himself. The design had become a staple of American coinage, and by the 1980s, it was instantly recognizable to millions. Around Roosevelt's portrait appears the word liberty to his left in bold capital letters, a reminder that liberty was the central ideal. The coin represented directly beneath the chin of Roosevelt are the words "In God We Trust," the national motto reaffirmed during a century of conflict and change, while beneath the neck truncation appears the date 1986, struck into every dime that left the mint that year. On certain examples, depending on the mint of origin, a mint mark PD or S appears indicating Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, and these mint marks add a layer of interest for collectors since each location carried its own mintage numbers and production standards. The reverse of the dime continues its symbolism, a torch blazing in the center representing liberty, flanked by an olive branch to the left symbolizing peace, and an oak branch to the right, representing strength and independence. The combination reflects the balance the nation strives to maintain: liberty, peace, and strength bound together by unity. The inscriptions on the reverse include United States of America along the top, E pluribus unum across the center, meaning out of many one, and the denomination 1 dime below completing the design. By 1986, the dime was no longer made of silver as it had been in earlier decades. Prior to 1965, all dimes were struck in 90% silver and 10% copper, but the Coinage Act of 1965 ended that era due to rising silver prices. Since then, dimes had been struck in clad composition, consisting of a copper core sandwiched between outer layers of cupronickel, giving the coin its silvery appearance without the intrinsic value of precious metal. The 1986 dime follows this clad standard, weighing 2.27 grams with a diameter of 17.9 millimeters and a reeded edge. The use of clad coinage reflects the economic realities of modern minting, where durability and cost efficiency outweighed the use of silver. The mintages of the 1986 Roosevelt dime were substantial, reflecting the massive demand for circulating coinage in a growing economy. At the Philadelphia Mint, over 1.3 billion dimes were produced, while the Denver Mint added nearly 1 billion more in circulation totals. The 1986 dime was a common issue, struck in the hundreds of millions and found in everyday commerce. Yet among this ocean of dimes there were special strikes as well. The San Francisco Mint struck proof dimes intended for collectors. These proof coins featured sharper details, frosted devices, and mirror-like fields that made them desirable for numismatic collections. While the 1986 dime is common in circulation, its value to collectors depends on condition, rarity of varieties and errors, and the quality of proof. Strike circulated examples are generally only worth face value, but uncirculated coins in pristine mint state condition, graded by services such as PCGs or NGC, can carry higher premiums for collectors, especially in grades Ms 67 or higher, where only a fraction of coins survive. In top quality proof dimes with deep cameo contrast from the San Francisco Mint also carry added value. The story of the 1986 dime cannot be separated from its context. In the 1980s, a decade of cultural transformation, the Reagan administration was emphasizing economic growth, national defense, and American pride. Technology was advancing With the personal computer era beginning, pop culture was being defined by music, television, and cinema, and yet every day Americans carry dimes in their pockets, a coin that quietly linked them to their history, to the fight against polio, to the leadership of Roosevelt, and to the enduring values of liberty and unity. In coinage, even the smallest piece of money carried a cultural weight. Collectors also examine varieties and errors from 1986, which make certain dimes stand out. Double die. Obverse and reverse errors, off-center strikes, and coins with filled mint marks are especially prized by numismatists. While rare, they highlight the unpredictability of minting and how a small mistake can turn an ordinary dime into a collectible worth far more than face value. It is in these details that numismatics becomes more than just collecting. It becomes a detective story, each coin a clue to the history of minting technology and American culture. Legacy of the Roosevelt dime continues to this day, but by focusing on the 1986 issue, we see a moment frozen in time, represents a coin produced at high volumes for everyday use, yet it also ties into the broader narrative of 20th century America. It reflects Roosevelt's enduring memory through his portrait. It reflects the values of liberty, peace, and strength. Through its reverse design, it reflects the shift from silver to clad coinage and the realities of modern economics, and it reflects the pride of a nation continuing to mint coins that tell a story with every stricasso. When you hold a 1986 dime, you are not just holding 10 cents of American currency, you are holding a piece of the 1980s, you are holding a connection to Franklin Roosevelt, you are holding the vision of John R. Sinek's artistry, and you are holding a small but powerful piece of American history that has traveled through pockets, purses, registers, and bank vaults for nearly 4 decades. A coin that in its own quiet way continues to tell the story of a nation. In the world of American coinage, few stories are as fascinating as the humble dime. And when we narrow our focus to the year 1973, we find ourselves exploring a chapter of monetary history that bridges politics, economics, artistry, and the evolution of United States currency itself. The 1973 Roosevelt dime is not just a 10-cent piece, but a cultural artifact, one that connects the legacy of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the rise of modern minting technology, and the transformation of American commerce in the post-war and Cold War eras. In this deep dive, we will unfold the detailed and professional history of the 1973 dime, a journey that could fill hours of careful exploration, because every aspect of this small coin carries significance and meaning. And by understanding it, you will not only grasp the history of a dime, but also better understand America itself. To begin, we must remember why Franklin Delano Roosevelt was chosen to appear on the dime in the first place. Roosevelt had been one of the most transformative presidents in American history, leading the nation through the Great Depression and the darkest days of the Second World War. He passed away in April 1945, just months before the war ended, and his leadership during crisis earned him immense respect and admiration. The dime was chosen to carry his portrait not only because of his leadership, but also because of his personal connection to the March of Dimes, a campaign that sought to fight polio, the disease that had afflicted Roosevelt himself. Thus the dime became not just money, but a symbol of resilience, courage, and the fight against suffering. The design of the dime that we know today was the work of John R. Sinek, chief engraver of the United States Mint. Sinek crafted a profile of Roosevelt for the obverse of the coin facing left with simple classical features that represented dignity and leadership. The reverse carried a torch symbolizing liberty, flanked by an olive branch for peace and an oak branch for strength. This design, introduced in 1946, has continued almost unchanged to the present day, and in 1973 it was still the coin that every American carried in their pocket. No, we come to the specific year 1973. This was a time of great transition for the United States and for the world economically, politically, and socially. The early 1970s saw the unraveling of the Bretton Woods system, the decoupling of the dollar from gold, and the rise of inflationary pressures following years of war spending in Vietnam, as well as the oil crisis that was looming on the horizon. Coins, like the 1973 dime, reflected this larger monetary story because they had already shifted from the silver dimes of the pre-1965 era to the clad composition of copper and nickel that defined post-silver coinage. The 1973 dime was struck from a core of pure copper clad with layers of copper-nickel, giving it the silvery appearance that most people associate with the dime, yet containing no precious metal value. This change in composition was one of the most significant reforms in modern US coinage history, and it made the 1973 dime a representative of the era of practicality, efficiency, and cost-saving. When discussing the 1973 dime, we must also turn to the role of the three mints that produced them. Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco each played a different part in striking dimes for circulation and collectors. Philadelphia struck dimes without a mint mark. Denver struck circulation coins with the D mint mark, and San Francisco produced proof issues bearing the S mark. The proof dimes of 1973 were made with mirrored fields and frosted devices designed specifically for collectors and struck with extra care and polish compared to circulation strikes. These proof dimes highlight the growing numismatic market of the 1970s, when more Americans than ever were turning to coin collecting both as a hobby and as an investment. In terms of numbers, the mintage of 1973 dimes was vast, with hundreds of millions struck to meet the needs of commerce. They circulated widely across the country, and most were used in everyday transactions, from parking meters to payphones, vending machines, and small purchases. The dime was essential in American life during the 1970s, and this ubiquity makes the survival of high-grade examples rare because most were handled heavily in circulation. Collectors today search for dimes from 1973 in mint state condition, especially those with full torch details on the reverse, meaning the lines of the torch are sharply struck. These are considered higher quality and fetch stronger prices in the collector market. By the basic history of production and circulation, the 1973 dime carries with it the echoes of American culture in that decade. This was the time of Watergate, political scandal, economic uncertainty, and rapid cultural change. Yet coins like the dime served as quiet constants in everyday life. Their small size made them easy to overlook, but their symbolism, tied directly to the legacy of Roosevelt and the values of liberty, peace, and strength, reminded Americans of their national identity in uncertain times. When we dig deeper into the 1973 dime, we also enter the realm of errors and varieties which fascinate collectors. Some dimes of this year may exhibit striking errors such as off-center strikes, double dies, clipped planchets, or weak strikes, all of which create rarity and value in the numismatic market. Error coins serve as accidental snapshots of the minting process, revealing how even modern machinery could produce mistakes that turn ordinary dimes into prize collectors' items. Another important perspective is the international use of US coins. During this period, American coinage often circulated beyond US borders in military bases, embassies, and trade zones. The dime in particular, due to its convenient size and durable clad composition, was seen in many parts of the world wherever American influence extended. Thus, the 1973 dime is not just a national object, but also a global one, reflecting America's role in the Cold War world. The long legacy of the dime and its story in 1973 can also be linked to the psychology of money itself, to how people perceive value. Even though the dime is worth only 10 cents, its role in countless transactions cemented it as a backbone of the American economy. From phone calls that cost a dime to a pack of gum or a bus ride, coins shaped daily life in ways that larger bills could not, and the dime was central to this routine. By the time we conclude our exploration of the 1973 dime, we can appreciate it as much more than a small coin, is a piece of history, a representation of Roosevelt's legacy, a product of the mint's transition into clad coinage, an artifact of 1972's American life, and an enduring collectible that continues to fascinate historians, economists, and numismatists today. The story of the 1973 dime could fill hours because every detail, from its design to its composition to its role in circulation, carries connections to broader themes of history and culture. And through this lens, we see that the 1973 dime is both ordinary and extraordinary, a reminder that sometimes the smallest objects hold the greatest stories.